We will call the City of Hayes January 12th, 2023 meeting at 4 o'clock to order. All 5 commissioners are present. First item on the order of business is the consideration of approval of minutes from December 22, 2022. Any questions, changes, or comments on those?
I have none.
None. They will stand approved as presented.
You sure you didn't want to talk about it?
Any comments from citizens in the audience? No?
Wait.
Next up will be the consent agenda. Only thing on here right now is the mayoral appointment recommendations for Northwest Kansas Community Corrections and Northwest Kansas Juvenile Services Governing Board. I will ask for a motion to approve those.
Move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Jacobs, second by Commissioner Musil. Any other questions or comments on that? Okay, I'll call for a vote. All in favor say aye.
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 Passes 5-0. Next up, the 2023 Street Maintenance Program Award of Bid. Jesse.
Good afternoon. I am Jesse Rohr, Director of Public Works. So I'm here to talk about the 2023 Street Maintenance Project Award of Bids. So each year, staff evaluates the condition of city streets, and we develop a maintenance program brought forward to the commission for your consideration. We utilize different tools such as traffic counts, pavement condition assessments, past maintenance treatments, public input, and our available budget for assistance in putting the program together. We are funded primarily with what we call special highway funds. Those funds look like this in the 23 budget. You can see we have just over $1.5 million budgeted for street maintenance out of the special highway budget. We do have an add-on project that I'll talk about a little bit as well. That's not special highway, but we did bid it along with the special highway street maintenance projects. And that's a project that will be funded out of special parks funding, which you can see on the bottom has a balance of $90,000 for the 23 budget. So this map shows the various locations for the projects that were bid. In the next few slides, I'll show some details of each project. You can tell by all the coloration on the map, we're touching a lot of the streets in Hayes this year, as we do most years. Before I go into the specific projects, just a note about the bids. As you'll see here, we did open bids on December 13th of 2022, and we did receive bids from 10 contractors that bid on the 8 different projects. The bid documents, as is typical, were structured such that a contractor could bid on one or more of the various projects. Several of those 10 bidders did bid on more than one project. And as I mentioned last week, this was one of the first times that we can recall that we had at least 2 bids on every single project. So we were very, very happy with the bids that we received. So now a breakdown of the various projects. I'll give a little description of the project and then the location and the bid of each. So the first is seal coat. Most of us are familiar with the seal coat projects. We do those almost every year. Excuse me, kind of paint the streets black in a sense. So the seal coat is a bituminous liquid mixture that's applied to asphalt pavement. It has a smooth black finish and does not have a rock surface like chip seal as we have done in some years past. The seal coat product will fill the fine cracks and voids in the asphalt, and we have found that it does indeed help preserve the life of the street. So most of the projects identified for seal coat were located in areas that received a chip seal 5 or 6 years ago. Circle C Paving was once again the low bidder. They are out of Goddard, Kansas. They have done this project the last several years for us and have done a great job. Their bid, as you can see, was just over $500,000. The seal coat areas are these dark blue areas on the map. So mostly in the northwest quadrant of Hayes, but there's a few outliers as well that will receive the seal coat treatment throughout 2023. Next one is Polypatch. Polypatch is a product, again, we've been using for several years. It's a rubberized tar with an aggregate added in it. It is designed for repairing cracks that are too large for crack seal, but maybe not large enough for pavement replacement yet. It's used in advance of surface seals like chip seal, seal coat, and microsurfacing. Excuse me. The Polypatch project will cover different areas throughout town. Various staff will go out and identify areas for this project as needed. Stripe and Seal of Hayes was the low bidder. And again, they've done this project for us for several years. They as well do a great job for us. Reclamite, or sometimes called the Asphalt Rejuvenator, It's a preservative seal that's used on newer asphalt streets that do not yet warrant more of an advanced treatment. The cost is significantly less than a seal coat or a chip seal, and it helps a new street stay in good condition. So sometimes people ask why you are already doing maintenance on our new street. And again, it's like keeping your car clean. You know, you want to keep that car clean so it stays looking nice, and this is what it does to the street. The product goes on clear, so pavement markings, if present, such as bike lanes or other markings, are preserved and do not need to be reapplied, which is an advantage to this product. The streets that are identified for Reclamite this year were either milled and overlaid in the last couple of years, so they have newer asphalt on them, or they have been previously preserved with Reclamite.
Hey, Jesse,
Yes.
when we put down a brand new street for like all the new developments, how soon is the first time we have to touch it with any of this? Typically.
Oh, for example, the one street we're doing, 4th Street from 33rd to 38th, we overlaid that last year. And so this will get a Reclamite treatment this season already. Again, it helps kind of keep that asphalt flexible. It does soak into the surface, keeps it flexible and pliable, and with the traffic across it, helps keep those cracks from forming. So it's kind of keeps it, like say, in that pliable state.
The concrete? Yeah, well, either one.
Any new
Like,
street.
any like new development, we put new streets in. So like every year we touch them, or?
We're not now. If it is a new asphalt street, we might hit it within that first year or two with the Reclamite project or product. Seal coat, it might be every 5 years or so.
Okay.
If it's a concrete street, other than crack seal operations, if needed, some of those we don't have to touch for several years.
Okay, thank you.
Would be typical.
You have to keep that bituminous glow on our streets.
Okay.
The low bidder on the Reclamite project was Pro Seal. Just like the other projects, Pro Seal has done this project for us for the last several years. They'll come in, and these projects will be done within 2 or 3 days at the most. So it's a quick project. They're here and gone before most people even know it.
You said Reclamite's pretty specialized.
It is, but however, we did get 2 bidders on this this year. I think it's the first year we've actually had 2 bids on the Reclamite product. So again, we were happy to it and happy with the bids. And it is, like I say, it does take a special applicator. We do, city staff through Public Works, they do assist with that project. We spread a mason sand. We use our sand spreaders like you'll see in the streets in the winter to follow up behind the liquid product and apply that sand, a real fine mason sand that gets worked in. It kind of acts as a blotting agent, but also, again, helps seal those fine cracks in the pavement.
Jesse, you said we got at least 2 bids on every project.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Were they all close?
Some were close, some were not. I believe the bid tabs were included in your packet.
I didn't. have
There were
those in front of me.
some that were, I'd say, outliers that were significantly higher. However, for a lot of them, they were very close. In fact, one of our bids, we had 2 bids on. I think it was the Sidewalk project. They came in the exact same.
Exact same.
And so we actually we requested bids from those 2 contractors again. And it came in, of course, a lower bid. So many of them were very close.
How do we know when we get one bid whether it's actually a reasonable bid or not?
A lot of times we use references from past years. If it's significantly higher than our estimate, we might start asking questions. And then at that point, we have the choice of not awarding the bid. Maybe we wait for a future year. Or if there's reasons that the bid is high and we expect it to remain high over the coming years, we may go ahead and award it anyway.
So I'm looking at, I think it's the one you're, no, it's the alley, but like you had 3 bids. One's like 930 and the other 2 are 630s. Why would one be so much different? I mean, I know sometimes you guys say they're just not really interested, but they actually bid, or?
I think a lot of it has to do with contractor schedules. Some of them may need the work more than others. Some of them have to come from out of town, so mobilization fees will be significantly more as well.
Gotcha.
Some of them may not specialize in that project and may use a subcontractor, which adds to their cost as well. So there's definitely a lot of factors.
Okay.
Next project is what we call curb and brick repair. This is something we try to do a little bit of every year. This year's project concentrates on 2 areas. We We have repairs in the 500 block of West 15th Street and repairs in the 1800 block of Ash. Areas of broken damage to curb and gutter will be replaced, and areas of brick settling will be repaired, including the concrete base pavement that lies under the brick. We're not doing any complete brick streets. We're not even doing half the streets. These are segmented areas along the streets that have failed, similar to what you can see in the pictures. Here's the two areas that are highlighted, the 15th Street and Ash Street area. Morgan Brothers of La Crosse was a low bidder at $64,000. They have done this work for us before. Probably the nearest project to these they've done would be the 17th Street from Main Street to Hall Street they did a few years ago. And that project turned out really good and it's held up really well. The concrete alley reconstruction, you might recall in 2022 we did 2 alleys. This year we are proposing 1 concrete alley to reconstruct. This one is the East 100 block between 12th and 13th, or otherwise identified as the Fox Theater Alley. This alley has deteriorated to the point of needing total reconstruction, as you can see in the pictures here. And with the exception of the entrances to the alley on Main and Oak, which were recently reconstructed, the rest of the pavement will be replaced. The alley will be constructed with new concrete with an inverted flow line. Highlight here shows the location of that alley. Sweeney Pavement of Hayes was a low bidder at just under $60,000 on that project. Every year we try to add at least 1 project, if possible, out of Special Highway to do a major street rehab project. This year we have 1 large one and 2 smaller ones. Bids came in. We bid the 4th Street project from 27th to 29th as the base bid, and then we had 2 alternate bids. One of those is MacArthur from 20th to 22nd, and the other, General Hayes from Cody to Downing. Here you can see the general areas here. The one, 4th Street there north of 27th, that's highlighted. That was the base bid, and the other 2 are alternates. The base bid and alternates did come in low enough that we are recommending award of all, as they do fall within our budget amount. T&T Builders of Hayes was the low bidder at just under $635,000. T&T's probably most recent projects were the 2 alleys that we reconstructed in 22, as well as 22nd Street from Vine to Allen. They did that project for us as well.
Being right by Wilson and Roosevelt, are those going to be done outside of school?
So we have already spoke with USD 49. John Brown, our project manager, made contact with staff there. We are hoping to do the MacArthur project during the summer. However, there's not enough summer months to do both Fort and MacArthur. What was recommended and agreed to by USD 49 staff was to maintain 1 lane southbound on Fort Street throughout the entire project to allow that school circulation path there. So they may get started on that one late in the spring, and then be working on that during summer, and then also getting on MacArthur. So we have as little disruption as possible with the school traffic.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And we have our sidewalk program. We are, again, continue our popular sidewalk rebate program for 2023. That's used to fix sidewalks like you see in the middle picture and the picture on the left here. Very popular program. We've had that for several years now. We are, again, earmarking $10,000 out of Special Highway for that program. And then in addition, we did bid a new sidewalk that will be located on the north side of the fire station, south side of 41st Street, when the new fire station is constructed later this year. That sidewalk project, that's one I mentioned we had 2 bids on. Initially, they both came in the exact same dollar amount. Morgan Brothers did end up being the low bidder on that, just under $11,000 for that project. That project would most likely occur at or near the end of the fire station construction project. Then the last project, this is the one I mentioned earlier that we added on. It's not out of Special Highway, but out of Special Park funding. The Alba Park parking lot project, which is located off of Grant Street, does need replacement, as you can see in the pictures here. It's really nothing more than compacted millings that were placed there several years ago. There's really no other rehab projects that can help with this parking lot. Therefore, the asphalt millings will be removed. We'll make sure the base is stabilized, and then it will be a new concrete parking lot when completed. T&T Builders, the same contractor as the major street projects. They were the low bidder on this one, at just under $79,000. Again, this is coming out of special parks. They had $90,000 budget for this project, so they're under budget as well. Okay, I know there's a lot of information on this screen, but here's a breakdown of the various projects and the total costs. And probably the main things I want to point out is the top red circle there. As you can see, there's a balance remaining of just over $70,000. We always we like to have that cushion of a little bit of funds left in the special highway in the event something comes up during any one of the projects. However, with those $70,000, we also intend to do design engineering for the rehab of the Main Street Bridge crossing Big Creek. We are hoping to reconstruct or rehab that bridge in 2024. So we've got the funds on our special highway this year to do design. We'll do design. In fact, those proposals to solicit the engineering design on that project are almost ready and may go out as early as next week. All projects are scheduled to be completed no later than the end of 2023. And as I mentioned, similar to the USD 49 projects, or the school projects, USD 49 and other entities that are affected by the street projects will be notified ahead of time, as is typical with these sort of projects. These will be the options for you action-wise today, and the action requested. Any questions for me?
Anything move you over there?
No. No questions. Thank you. Do I need to?
Go ahead and move.
Make a motion.
Okay.
We're all being
I didn't
quiet.
know that you wanted to- Sorry. I move that we approve as requested.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments for Jesse?
That bridge, is that strictly a city project?
That is a city project. It's a city-owned bridge. Be a city project, correct?
I have a question, and which gets back to just a little bit of selecting what streets need to be done, because we always seem to be doing a really good job of keeping streets in good shape, but every year come in and you show pictures of the bricks or something, it's like, oh my gosh, this needs rehab really bad, but they couldn't have gotten that bad in 1 year. So there's got to be some other streets right now that look just like the pictures that you said that you decided that we're going to do these streets this year. And I already know there's going to be some very similar pictures next year that didn't all happen just in 1 year that you're going to pick to do next year.
I think that like where Mason lives is doing this year and where Toby lives is doing this year. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
So I know there's lots to be done and you have to do it in small chunks based on our budget, but I just didn't know how you decided which chunks are slightly worse than the other ones, or how you want to go about it.
Sometimes it is a flip of a coin. Like I said, no doubt we could go out and find other areas that look similar to these. We keep a running list throughout the year of areas identified, either that citizens call in requesting something with the street, or that staff identifies, or various commissioners identify areas as well. So yeah, if we had multi-millions to attack them all at once, we would love to do that. And as you recall, I think back in October when I came, we talked about the pavement assessment that was done for us here. And, according to that, we are staying ahead of the curve with the funding we're spending. And we want to be careful there and make sure we're staying ahead of that curve and don't get behind like we were more than 15 years ago before we started the robust street maintenance program. So we feel the amount we're spending is adequate at this time and will help us stay ahead of the curve on maintenance.
Well, that's something I mentioned last week. You talk to people in the community, it feels like they kind of have street maintenance fatigue or whatever. But when I first got on the commission, we were kind of behind the curve, and I feel like what you guys have said, we're above now where we should be, or we're maintaining. And if we don't do it, then we're going to go backwards, and I don't think any of us want to go there. So
Pothole fatigue is probably a lot worse than maintenance.
Exactly, and I don't like that. My car doesn't like that either. So
Yeah.
I think we're doing a good job.
You helped me out with the years, because I remember, I was going to say 12, 15 years ago, if we look what we did prior to that, I think I would really like to comment on not only staff, but all associates that are working on these projects. What we've been able to do in the last 15 years with streets, because staff, particularly Toby, has stayed very focused on that and making sure, and as we visit other communities and we find out what kind of streets there are out there, and I could name 2 or 3 right off the bat, we don't have those kinds of comments anymore, and I'm extremely proud of how things are looking. So congratulations, Toby, and the rest of you for keeping up on this.
Yeah, and like Sean mentioned, I think I'd much rather people complain about too many projects going on than complain about the condition of the streets.
Yeah, I mean, that's the basis of what we do in local public service is provide infrastructure and safety. So if we're ahead of the curve and we have, best of the best with streets and best of the best with safety,
What more can we ask?
I won't complain about that ever.
If I remember right, when I first, around 2013, we were like 900,000 we were spending on the streets, somewhere in that area.
Yeah, we're trying to hit 1 million every year, but
Right.
sometimes it'd be a tad under.
Right. So now we're consistently over 1 million, which I think is good.
Yeah, and I know Commissioner Jacob gave us credit, but honestly, it was a joint effort. And before the 3/4 cent sales tax was passed to fund the general fund, they had limited funds to spend on streets, and so they had your $600,000 in street maintenance money that would come in, and then the city would siphon 400,000 of that off for materials and equipment and personnel, and so we went a lot of years and didn't spend but maybe 200,000 a year on streets. And so one of the promises made that the commission made when the residents passed the sales tax was money raised for streets will be spent on streets, and we're going to spend more money on streets. And you guys have done that every year. We've, for the most part, averaged over $1 million a year on street maintenance, and then all the money you guys have spent in commission capital reserve on street reconstruction is part of that too.
And as Doug continues to build houses, we need more streets, right? Keep doing that, please. Yeah, there you go.
All right. There are no further questions. I'll call for a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Jesse.
thank you.
All right. R9 Ranch update. Toby.
Has he been doing anything with that?
I don't know.
Been laying on his desk.
You may be aware that we own a property in Edwards County.
We are aware.
There have been a few things going on with regard to the R9. Toby Doherty, city manager, by the way, to where I thought it was time to give an update for the commission, but anybody that may be watching. So June of 22, Judge Gatterman ruled in the city and state's favor in what I'm going to call a legal side diversion in the first part of the regulatory process, which is the change in use, changing the water rights from irrigation to municipal. Once that is done, that meant that process was complete and the change applications were deemed approved. And so that then was the kickoff for the water transfer process. The transfer process is the statewide benefit where a hearing panel was convened and they appoint a hearing officer. And then there's a series of statutes that are followed in order to determine that the transfer of water from Edwards County to Hays and Russell is in the best interest of the state of Kansas. So the hearing panel convened on September 28th, and they requested the appointment of a hearing officer from the Secretary of Administration. The Secretary appointed Matt Spurgeon, who's an administrative law judge, on October 21st. And Mr. Spurgeon set the pre-hearing conference for February 5th. The Water Transfer Act requires a hearing in the basin of origin for water transfers. Now, basin is pretty broad because it's the Arkansas River Basin, so you can go from Leadville, Colorado to Tulsa, Oklahoma if you wanted to. But so we don't know where that's going to be, but the pre-hearing conference will determine what the hearing structure is going to look like, who's going to be the participants, how cases are going to be presented. All that stuff's going to take place at the pre-hearing conference. I'm speculating a bit here because this process has never been followed. And so we really don't know what a hearing looks like in this case because we know what we have to present as far as evidence to fulfill the requirements in the statutes, but we don't know what a hearing looks like. So the hearing officers are going to be setting the path moving forward for future water transfers. So by state law, and you guys have in front of you a transfer schedule. In the statutes, there are steps in the water transfer process, and then there are shall not happen closer than 30 days or longer than 120 days. And so the pre-hearing conference is one of those. You have a public hearing, but it can't be any sooner than 90 days and no longer than 120 days after the pre-hearing conference. So we would expect a hearing to be set at that pre-hearing conference or shortly after the pre-hearing conference. And again, we will have our ideas on where we think the hearing should happen, but we're not really sure where that's going to take place. So I mentioned earlier that the water transfer process started out with a ruling by Judge Gatterman in the state and the cities of Hayes and Russell's favor. Well, that ruling was appealed. Now, we have the change applications approved. We're moving forward with the transfer process. They have every right to appeal, and so they exercise their right to appeal. So we filed a motion to transfer the process to the Supreme Court, saying let's just get it done with, and skip the appellate court stage, go straight to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court agreed to accept the transfer, and so the opponents in this case, they filed 3 motions to extend. Their claim was they were really busy with other stuff, and the Supreme Court granted it, but on the 3rd motion they said this is your deadline. So their brief was filed December 14th, which is their reasoning, why they feel it needs to be appealed, and Judge Gatterman was wrong. The cities and DWR's reply is due February 13th, and then they have a chance to re-reply to our reply, and then possible oral arguments in the summer. Yes? Sam?
February 13th is when our reply is due, and immediately that 15 days kicks in, and theirs is due within that
Yes,
28.
there
There's no
was-
extension possibilities in
Well,
there?
they can ask. We don't know if they'll get it or not, but by Supreme Court rule, their reply is due 14 or 15 days after ours is due. Mel might know more on that.
14.
Do you know if they could get extensions on that?
Possible.
And they've been waiting to the last possible day to file anything too, right?
They wait till the last day to file or even ask for an extension. And in fact, there was one extension to the Supreme Court where they waited until like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the date it was due, and I think it was on a Friday, to ask the Supreme Court for an extension. So it was.
Doesn't the Supreme Court finally get tired of it?
Well, I think the Supreme Court gave them three extensions and said
And
no
that's-
more.
we're done.
This
So
is your
he-
deadline. Get something filed.
But then this is the next process.
Yes,
So it could
Yes.
be an extension on this process.
possibly. The reality is, Commissioner, if they want to drag this out, fine. I mean, we're not worried about it.
Right.
We've received our positive ruling. We're starting the transfer process. We're moving forward. We don't think they're going to be successful. So if they want to drag the process out and spend the money, and I mean, it's do it at your time, because we're moving forward with other stuff. So regarding their brief. So during the initial judicial review proceedings that Judge Gatterman ruled on, the opponents threw a lot of stuff against the wall, and the judge pretty much swatted it all down and just said, no, the state did everything by the book. You're not correct here. So we were interested to see how they were going to approach this appeal, because they were pretty resoundingly shut down by Judge Gatterman. So they did drop a couple of their arguments. They rehashed most of their arguments. And so it's kind of more of the same in their brief. It's just sort of a rehashing of their existing arguments. And to summarize what their argument is against this, I can summarize it in two areas. One is they are banking their argument on potential harm that could be caused for our project. Now, they haven't proven any harm. They haven't proven that anything we're doing is going to harm anybody, but they talk about the potential harm that could be happening. And that's enough to where, the chief engineer should have taken that into account and should have lessened the amount of water that we were able to transfer out of the property. And then they have this baffling and, I don't know, just baffling and confusing at the same time argument that grass uses almost as much water as irrigated crops. So by converting the R9 to native grass, that grass is going to use so much water, it's going to harm the aquifer, and so therefore we should be limited in what we're taking out of the aquifer. It's just a
We should grow corn instead?
well, if you look at their calculations, we should be able to grow dryland corn at about 300 bushel an acre because that's how much water that grass uses. So again, it's a baffling argument.
But Toby, I mean this, and I know everybody feels the same way I do. Every time we have an update on this, I get more angry. And every time I do, the only thing that keeps going through my mind is the increased cost in this process from the day one when we started to where it is today. And I hope that every opportunity we have to have it written anywhere, what this increased cost is, that we continue to do that.
Well, and I can tell you right now, this deviation that they have caused has cost us about $2 million in attorneys, engineers. That's hard cost. Soft cost, inflation, you're talking $30-40 million
Right. That
in
just
what we
blows
could have
my
done versus what it's going to cost now.
That's
You know, what's interesting is, so the group that's opposing this is a group of irrigators in the Stafford, St. John, Pratt area called the Water Protection Association of Central Kansas. They were formed because of the Quivira wildlife impairment, knowing that was going to ultimately affect the irrigators that were causing the impairment because they have junior water rights.
Did you say irrigators or irritators?
Irrigators.
both.
So here's what's baffling about this. The first part of our regulatory process, the consumptive use process, this is not blazing new territory. This is something that's been baked into regulations for a long time. This is something that is widely utilized across the state of Kansas. Converting water from one use to another is a widely utilized practice. And there's a formula that gets applied. When you convert irrigation water rights to municipal water rights, you don't get 100% of that. You get a formulaic reduction because that formula is built in to protect the water rights around you and to protect the aquifer to make sure the new use does not use more water than the previous use. So in every application of water right conversions prior Hayes and Russell, the formula is applied, people get the new use, and they walk away. And including water right conversions that have happened in the area down there. And nobody seems to have a problem with that. So Hayes and Russell decided we're going to go above and beyond what's required by formula. We're going to reduce our water rights again by 30% because we want to make sure that we don't do anything to potentially harm the aquifer. And to this group, it's not enough. Somehow we're going to have this potential harm by doing this, even though we have the absolute right to do this. The hypocritical angle is this group represents a group of irrigators that is causing a direct impairment on the Quivira Wildlife Refuge. They have junior water rights upstream in Rattlesnake Creek that are pumping water and preventing the senior water right from getting their water in the Quivira Wildlife Refuge, which was dry this year, by the way, and partly because they're being impaired by the irrigators upstream. The state of Kansas has said very clearly, if you reduce your pumping by 30%, you will remedy the impairment of the Quivira Wildlife Refuge. And it's a non-starter. They will not cut their pumping. And they do it because they fall back on water rights or property rights. And you can't make me modify how I use my property rights.
Unless they belong to a municipality.
Well, their property rights unless they belong to a municipality, and then they're malleable, and then regulations don't apply. And then we can sort of invent our own regulations to impose on them. Meanwhile, we'll ignore the regulations and the rules as they apply to us. It's just, Sandy, it is frustrating. It's baffling. They appear to, and here's the discussion, we've been kind of having internally. It's one thing to kind of go on record and say, we want the state to apply regulations differently to Hayes and Russell. It's another thing to file a legal case because this is where case law becomes precedent. And this is where case law supersedes regulations. So if the Supreme Court were to somehow rule in their favor, it could just throw consumptive use out the window. And so the type of tactics they are using they would eliminate any change of use in the Ogallala Aquifer, because the Ogallala Aquifer is a non-renewable resource. And so any change in use that uses one drop more potentially than what was before, doesn't matter what their water rights say, that could be the end of it. So dairies, feedlots, anything in the Ogallala could just be shut down by this argument. And the state could just step back and say, sorry, this is case law, this is the rule now. I don't think the ag industrial economy wants this to take place. I don't think people that own dairies and feedlots, or people that own water rights they want to sell to dairies and feedlots and industry, want this to take place. So it's kind of a weird, dangerous game they're playing because they want so bad to spite our project, and it's just because they don't like our project. They would rather see that water stay in Edwards County and
Stay.
fine, but we own the water rights.
I think
But it
that-
leaves Edwards County every single day in the form of various agricultural products. as
Right.
well.
Water leaves Edwards County and corn and alfalfa and soybeans and cattle and hogs and everything else.
Well, I think that it's going to continue to be a very serious issue throughout the state. And then you and I talked about an article I heard or read where water DWR or whomever was out in Thomas County, and they were having conversations out there about the Ogallala, and asked the governor to change. And you understand better than I do, but what they were asking is the governor to say they can no longer deplete the Ogallala, that they now that whatever that ruling was that allowed that to happen, they want her to stop that.
Yes, the Ogallala is fossil water. It does recharge, but very slowly, and it's been pumped out much faster than it recharges. And so the state, by policy, has a planned depletion. By policy, it states that we are going to have a planned depletion of the Ogallala. And so the Kansas Water Authority made a recommendation to the governor that shouldn't be the policy. The policy should be a preservation of the Ogallala for future generations. Now, what that looks like, we don't know, and there are certain recharges that take place, but it does mean if you're going to move away from planned depletion and some sort of a preservation, that people's water rights are going to have to reduce.
Absolutely.
It's just a matter of mathematics.
And them saying to the governor this needs to change doesn't mean anything's going to happen in the near future or ever, unless enough people keep this subject. I mean, it's getting serious throughout the state of Kansas again, and I think I would think this is to our benefit. We're talking about water for people. We're talking about water for sustainability of life in our area. I think that weighs differently.
So here's the ultra frustrating part is Kansas does not have priority use for water rights. The Kansas water law is based on the doctrine of prior appropriation, first in time, first in right. So it's a number. If Mel has water right number 1 and Elena has water right number 2, and Mel can't satisfy his water right, he can ask for his water right to be administered, and the chief engineer can shut Elena off until he's
Put it back there.
done. It's all about the number. So use, it doesn't matter. Now, Kansas also has a law that water has to be put to a beneficial use too, be it irrigation, industrial, stock watering, recreation, whatever, municipal. But it doesn't matter if Mel runs an orphanage and Elena's flood irrigating lettuce. If she has water rights number 1 and he has water right number 2, she trumps
She
him
still
every
gets it.
time because she has the lowest water rights. But the interesting part is, and look, I've spent a lot of time navigating water in Kansas. Water in Kansas is dominated by the ag industry. The ag industry utilizes 85% of the water in the state of Kansas. And so they've written the rules, they've written the regulations, they've learned to manipulate the rules to their benefit, and they have no problem manipulating the rules to their benefit. Jeff Crispin and I were on the GMD5 board meeting this morning watching that. This board had no problem waiving a regulation when it comes to moving an irrigation water right from one spot to another. Even though there was a requirement to reduce the quantity that irrigator was able to utilize when he moved that water right, the board had no problem moving that. But that's the same board that when we presented the 30% reduction said, yeah, we don't know if that's enough. Maybe we should go more. That's the frustrating part. So that's a governmental entity supposed to be there to protect groundwater, that when it comes to irrigation, yeah, it's just fine, we'll waive the regulation. And they haven't met a regulation they haven't been willing to waive as far as I've been watching. But when it comes to us, so in a way there's almost a reverse priority use. I would love to see a priority use because I think they would value people over everybody. But I don't think that's going to happen. So, not to get too sidetracked, We are moving forward. Sorry, Sean, do you have a question?
No, just
So our attorneys are working very diligently on the response in the Supreme Court. They're going to be ready to argue the case when the time comes, and I have no doubt that we're going to prevail when the argument actually happens. So we are preparing for the transfer process right now. The transfer process, when they get to the public hearing, it is going to be our attorney states it as I'm creating a record. So there's going to be a lot of documents submitted, because if that thing gets appealed, when you have a case appealed, only the record is appealed. You can't introduce new evidence, and so our attorney's creating the record. So it's going to be a long, boring, drawn-out process, but we know our attorneys are going to be thorough, and we're going to meet all the criteria in the statute. I am finalizing the well field and pipeline project design contracts. I hope to have those in front of you in the next couple months for approval, so we can get started on the design contract. As soon as the design contracts are approved, we're going to send out RFQs for land acquisition services. And the first step after we get an engineer on board is to help vet the land acquisition firms and then start acquiring the land for the pipeline itself. We are preparing the property for walk-in hunting and possibly more public use. So up until this year, the way I have looked at the R9 was about establishment of native grass, with the exception of a few areas that we probably need to go back and touch up and replant and some invasive control. Now it's about maintaining health of native grass. So now's when we can start transitioning towards a broader use of the property. So you're going to be seeing more on that as the year goes on for more of a public use of the property. And then I've been trying to identify any federal dollar out there that could help us pay for the project. So we've been hit with inflation, as everybody has, and then with time on top of that, it's even getting worse. So we've identified a lot of federal buckets out there. I've been narrowing those down. Within a month, I should have some firm options available for us, and then we'll talk about how we apply for that. And that was, I believe, all I had. I would stand for questions if you have any.
You have in here that, for example, that our reply is due February 13th, and then they get 15 days. Are we waiting till February 13th to put in our reply, or are we potentially putting it in earlier than that?
Ideally earlier than that. Keep in mind, we are tied with the state of Kansas in this. So the actual suit itself, the judicial review was state of Kansas, the Water Pack versus state of Kansas for Division of Water Resources and Chief Engineer. We filed as an intervener in that because we're a party to it. So everything we do, the state of Kansas has to do as well. So if the state of Kansas is ready to file early, we'll file early. The state may say we want a 2-week extension because we're still trying to get our brief ready, then we'll ask for the same thing. So we want to maintain a unified front with the state.
Very good.
So Toby, when we started this process, we had 26, 23 pivots.
We had 40, at our height, we had 43 pivots at the height of operation. We had 44 circles, and one of them wasn't broken out.
44 circles, okay. And so we're taking it back to natural grassland,
Yes.
and we're going to get 40% of our actual water rights to use if this is ever passed. Is that correct?
It's a little more than that. We have just a shade under 8,000 acre-foot of water rights, and the number we get on an average annual basis is 4,800 acre-feet. We can go up to 6756, but in any given 10-year period, we can average no more than 4,800 acre-feet. So it's a little more than half.
But in our community, we've shown year after year that we're the most conservative community on water throughout the whole state.
Yes.
And for them to think that we're going to waste the water or hurt agriculture, to me, is the craziest statement. And me, growing up on the farm, if I ever thought we were going to hurt agriculture, I'd be the first one against this. But like you said, this is for humans. And Hayes is going to grow, we're going to need it, but we're never going to waste water.
And not only that, Hayes and Russell use 3,000 acre-feet combined.
Right.
So even if we were to abandon our existing sources and pull every drop up, we're still using half the water we used when it was irrigated.
Right, that's what, yeah.
And so if you figure if we supplement half of our water and then it ramps up over time, that's why the visual I've showed you, and And 8 years ago, it was 225,000 acre foot. It's more than that now. That's why the aquifer is going to benefit. That's why we project
Right.
the aquifer is going to actually benefit by 225,000 acre feet over a 50-year period by converting this to irrigation. It's baffling.
You just have to
Yeah.
shake your head.
Yeah.
And just as relevant to that, corn is a grass. And corn has 36,000 stomata on the top of their leaves and 50,000 per square inch on the bottom, which is a higher level of stomata per square inch in corn leaves than other
And
native
you
grasses.
wonder why
I love
love
having a
sitting next to
scientist
him.
on
So,
You
so
know-
native grasses are actually going to transpire less water than crops of corn. So their argument of grasses, well, corn is a grass, so they're not, they lose the argument in just the definition, but they'd lose it in the scientific realm of how much water is
What
being
he
lost.
said.
Yeah.
You know, the argument's baffling on a lot of facets. One, there was grass growing there when the water rights were perfected. So that was part of the equation when you determined what the water rights were. Two, we're not going to round up the whole thing. I mean, that's not going to happen. That would be very damaging to the environment. But three, what's interesting is this. So WaterPack, in order to obey and push back the hammer of impairment proceedings, they've made a long list of promises, and the GMD is behind this too, of things they're going to do to help the Quivira Wildlife Refuge get water. Now, they haven't actually come through on these promises, but they've been making them for like 20 years. And one of the promises they make is we're going to shut off our end guns. So you've seen an irrigation pivot, and it has the gun that shoots the water out.
The biggest waste.
And it's a big waster of water. A lot of that water doesn't actually reach in the ground. So we're going to shut those end guns off. And then that's going to save all this water. And my thing is, isn't grass going to grow in those corners? So are you really saving anything? I mean, if they want to throw that logic out there. And then the other thing is they want to move water rights out of the immediate Quivira impairment zone and move them outside of that area. And my thought is, isn't grass going to grow there? So, you know, it's just the logic they're using to try to thwart us. It's just counter to everything they want to do. And look, the reality is, if you shut an end gun off, it is going to save water. If you stop irrigating corn and you move it out of the Rattlesnake Creek area, it is going to save water, and it's going to leave more water in the aquifer. But don't try to tell us that it's upside down when it's our project.
You know, one thing I was really proud when we started this, we were going to be neighborly. We're going to help Victoria if we can. We're going to, Ellis and whoever are in our area. But we've always said we won't use more than what we're allowed. And to me, I felt like we actually gained more attention, or good attention, when we started doing that, and I think it's the right way to do it. But, Kinsley people shop in Hayes. I mean, I see it all the time. And so why would we want to hurt them? And we're not hurting them. I mean, I think we're returning more water back to the land than what we were before when we were, with all the irrigation. So I think we're doing the right thing. And Toby, I think you're doing a great job. It drives me nuts. I feel like we're not at step one, but it sure feels like it.
We've made more progress
I know
this year
we-
than
yep.
we've made in 4 years.
And as frustrating as this process has been and how long it's taken, I think the most exciting thing is the slide saying, "Hey, we're getting ready to start design."
Yes.
I mean, this is the gas is going to get hit pretty soon, and this project's going to be coming to a close. And it's not going to happen overnight, obviously, but we're getting ready to get started. This is the most exciting thing I can think of. Is
I agree.
prior to the pandemic, we were like, "Oh, we're still through the process, blah blah blah." But like you said, in the last year, things have really taken off to where we're getting ready to start saying, "This is where the pipeline's going to go. This is how we're going to get it. This is how we're going to take care of it." We're getting a lot of those things taken care of day by day. Every single day is an R9 day. And it's super exciting to see that this project is finally going to have some tangible aspects to it. So, between you, staff, and the previous commissions that have been around throughout this, 30 years we've been having the R9, to see it come to this is it, this is go time, is extremely exciting. Water's coming. We're getting it.
It is.
Toby, I have one question. I see on the timeline that the process began in 2014. When did we purchase this land?
We purchased it in 1995,
Okay.
and then Russell purchased an 18% stake in 1996.
Okay, thank you.
And in 2014, now coming off as a significant drought, we still had a couple options on the table, Wilson Reservoir being one, and those got taken off the table. And the governing body said, we have to do it now. We know it's going to take a while. We have to do it now. And so that's when they decided to pull the trigger. They signed an interlocal agreement with the city of Russell, and we've been tied in this process ever since.
Thank you.
And I'll say it every single time. 1995, I was 4 years old. So
I moved to Hayes that year.
it's time to get her done. All right. Thank you, Toby. Appreciate the update and appreciate you guys working forward on getting this done.
Thank you.
Commission inquiries and comments. Commissioner Cunningham.
Yes, well, it's been a busy week. I've been getting educated a lot about the city, and it's all good. So thank you guys again, and I'm still learning and can't wait to keep learning more. So
Dr. Commissioner Barrick.
Scientists, whatever.
Scientist, Indiana Jones.
I was very excited today to drive down Vine Street, and I actually could drive the whole street. Just a little bit of finishing touches on some water drains and things, but I actually could drive there and back and get in and out on either side of the street. So hallelujah for that, and look forward to a year of finishing up lots of small projects on streets that aren't going to take 3 months longer than they were supposed to.
Commissioner Jacobs.
It's amazing what liquidated damages will do to a process if they don't grant you winter shutdown. I think they've done a wonderful job. It took 46, 50 days longer than they said, but I too was happy to drive down. The other thing I was really happy about, I don't know who did the striping, I don't know who was involved with that, but they were doing 27th Street. We got them to do the same things, the same company. And I got to tell you, those guys were working last night fast as you could see anybody moving, trying to beat that weather. And it was a great crew. So I don't know who they are, but good job, and tell them good job. We appreciate it.
Commissioner Barrick, I helped plant a lot of corn, mowed a lot of grass as a kid. I've never heard it put that way. I learned a lot tonight. Thank you.
You just got to listen to research.
Yeah.
Just gotta
Wow.
Be a quiz.
Yeah. I wrote it down, so I got it. So I got none.
I don't really have a whole lot. Stay warm. That's all I got. Okay, we'll adjourn at 4:52.
Oh, wait, that was a good recap.